Hello and welcome to Sedimentology Masterclass number 3, and today we're going to be talking about bayhead deltas. There's a lot to cover, so we'll just try and dive in right now. First of all, when you have a delta is a building out of sediment into standing water or into a body of water. And what you end up with is 3 separate parts of the delta. You have the bottom sets, which is what the delta's building out over. So these would generally be quite muddy. You have the top sets, which are generally fairly flat, and this is where the delta is, the delta top sediments will be deposited, and you end up with marshes, with river channels, crevasse splays, so flooding overbank deposits, levees, and mud between the channels. And then you have the 4 sets where the sediment's building out into a marine setting or into a lake. So what we have here at Glenmore in southern Calgary is that we have what's called a bayhead delta, and a bayhead delta is different in that it's in a restricted valley. So what happens with a bayhead delta is that I've got a diagram here showing a cross section where we have 3 stages, where we have early fall in sea level. So the sea level falls, and then we have a transgression, so the sea level starts flooding back in. So in our case, what happened here was that the dam was built out here beyond where the delta is, and the dam led to the whole lake filling up with water, and then the sediment started building out into that lake. So there's the flooding that would have happened when the delta was built, when the dam was built, and then the delta sediments start being deposited. As the water rises, the delta kind of is forced to build backwards, back towards the head of the valley, and then the sediments start prograding, so they start building out into the reservoir, and so you end up building this delta, this bayhead delta, into the reservoir. So if we have a look at this diagram here, this shows a pictorial representation of what our bayhead delta looks like here in Glenmore. So what we have is at the back of the system here, we have the river, which was coming down, which was always feeding and making this valley, but before the dam was here, the river was already here. So the river feeds down and starts building out these sediments here in our bayhead delta. So our bayhead delta has the delta front sediments here, which Arizona showed you at the beginning of that pan section. And then we have the delta top here with several river channels and some lagoonal sediments here. So there'll be some lower areas where there's a lot of muds and organic material. And what you see is that the lower part of the delta, so the more recently built part of the delta, is non-vegetated, but this older part of the delta here, which is more long-lived, has been colonized by vegetation. So there's a change in the vegetation levels here. So how do we recognize these bayhead deltas in the fossil record? Well, the sediments will coarsen up. The cliniforms, so these cliniforms here, which is where the delta is building out, and it's building out these layers one by one, they're called cliniforms. They're usually pretty thin, so they're only 5 to 15 meters in height and maybe 100 to 1,000 meters in length. And what you'll see is that there's more mud towards the bottom of these cliniforms as well, because the mud is not really being washed away because it's a relatively standing body of water that it's feeding into. The paleocurrents will be directed towards the basin. And in a normal bayhead delta, so not one here that we have that's almost man-made and built in a lake, you'll see a breakage tidal signature in there as well. So I've just drawn this little tiny sketch section here at the bottom. It's just the section that we might see in our dam. So we have the original fluvial sediments before the dam was built, so the original river channels that were coming through here. Then the dam is built, and we end up with some muddy sediments in the bottom of our new lake, and then our cliniforms from our bayhead delta start building out over the top of these muds. So that's the succession that we would expect to see. So I'll just ask Arizona to stand up and pan back round here to show you just this middle portion. And you can see in this middle portion here, we've got these muddy sediments. There's no vegetation on there, and we've got some really nice big channels that you can see that are building their way out. Now, Arizona, if you just pan back towards the mouth of the delta, so in that direction, down there, and you can see that's the head of that's the base of the delta there, so that's the delta front. And beyond there, in that bigger lake area down towards the east of Calgary, then we're going to have muddy sediments as well. Great. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to walk down onto the delta top and have a look at what the sediments are like there.